So welcome back to part 2 of this video, where we're working a slightly different method and workflow to creating our character animation here in this walk cycle example with our Hulk. In the previous video we worried about getting all of the major keying in to try and get over his sense of character and what he's doing in this shot, beginning to tell a little bit of story through his body language without getting caught up dealing with all the little technical animation details of the body mechanic itself, or rather the mechanics of the walk cycle, I should say. So we're going to continue right from where we left off, and the first thing that our guy is going to need at this stage then is a pair of legs. So here we go, our guy has got his legs back, and we can see straight away how ridiculous it looks, because of course there's no animation on them. Bit weird. So let's start working all of this in. As we can see, we haven't bothered to pose them at all, so the first thing that we want to do is start out straight at frame 1 here, and of course start with his initial relaxed pose. Work on getting a good sort of standing position like that. Now, we are going to be going into a walk, so before I just place them any old how, which foot is going to step first, I'm going to think. And it is, of course, going to be this one selected, his left foot. So to give that a bit more bite from the off, what I'm going to start out with is by having his left foot in his relaxed pose here, just sort of on the back, hanging back a little bit like this, whereas his right foot will position somewhat forward and to that side like this. We'll get his pole items, of course, and arrange those so as his knees are nice and square like that. We can also see that due to just the way that this got keyed initially, that certain keyframes have already been created on these items. However, they are at the key points where he is stepping, overlapping and so on, but unfortunately they're all right back at the base 0 here. So irrespective of what's happening, we're just going to take all of those keys, other of course than the first keyframe that we've just set, and we're just going to delete all of those. Right, so let's make a start, shall we? He does his little rise up, so before he does that he's going to anticipate it ever so slightly, and he'll do that by, let's see, there's the beginning of the rise, so 1-2 frames before that we'll take this foot, hold it in position there, and let's say take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll just slide it back just a little scotch like that. He'll do a little foot lift as he does, so let's go back there. We'll key a hold for that in those 3 frames. Start to just lift his heel a slight amount, keep it up until 1 before the actual final arrival frame, which is there. So hold it there, 1, 2, 3, and we'll just pop it right back down to 0 again. So it gives him a nice little lift like that, and there we go, starts to lurch his body forward. So we'll keep his left foot here on the ground for just a moment after, till about there, say. We can see that the foot system is of course providing the lift off in that rig, so we may not even need to key it specifically, but he's going to start lurching forward, 2, 3. I think that is a good place to hold it. We can revise that afterwards, and his contact point should probably be about there. So let's come into our side view. Okay, actually I think contact 1 frame before that. There we go, that's overextended, so of course we'll just tip his foot this, and 1, 2, set that back down to 0 there. And of course we forgot to hold frame it, so 1, 2, where does this begin? So we come back, you won't really need to have it up much before there, so let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, we'll click it to 0, come back to that point where he's just about to lift off, we can key it there, and then at that point where we just zeroed we can give it a little lift like that, and of course at that same point we can produce a little lift off for the foot. Doesn't need to be big, it doesn't need this huge exaggerated foot lift. In fact, we can possibly bring the lift ever so slightly earlier, Let's delete it from there because of course we're not actually wanting it in that same forward position, we're just wanting it in the upward position, and we're still of course keying all channels. So there we go. There's his first step. Easiest thing to do here is work on the same period as we gave the hip. So if we actually look at his hip, we can see that's 40, 52, so that's a 12 frame chunk there. So of course there it would be trailing. So of course we need to hold it at that point, and then of course 12 further out from that will be the next contact point, which again we put the slight over extension on here with the lift, which will make a bit higher because he's sort of into his swing now, so we've got this slightly more fierce stomping action. Obviously that needs to be held at 0 back here. Now this is the point where it holds, but of course it doesn't do an immediate lift off at that point. Let's say that we actually hold it for 2 frames longer on the ground there, possibly even 3. That's giving us a 9 frame swing of the foot, which for a 12 frame step is about right. And what we'll do is we'll now work on his foot lift here. So we'll move that 0 key, I think, to around there, and we'll create another 0 key there, at which point we have him lifting onto the toe like this, and of course at the final frame before lift off there we have him coming up onto the toe ever so slightly, and of course somewhere at the crossover we have that lift like this, and start to bring that back and down. Looks a little weird at the moment, of course, with only the 1 foot in action. Looks like he's doing some strange jump or hop, but we're just trying to think about the basic timing here, because of course it'll help us figure out how we're going to key the next foot. Just to tidy it up, we'll do the 2 frames forward and reset the value there, so of course that is the flap down. Since we are going to be repeating this action, then the easiest thing to do, rather than work on one leg and then the other leg, although you could do it that way if you preferred, I think it's easiest to work on both legs for a single cycle here, and then of course we can more easily repeat that for the future cycles. So I'm going to move over to his right foot here, and we'll look at when he wants to step. We'll say that that's probably going to be the final lift off point there. Again, we'll just find that contact, which should be here, get the right foot again, and we'll bring that forward there, so it's slightly overextended. It's 44 to 52, so that's pretty much a 9 frame swing. I say pretty much, obviously it's 8, but this is the first step there, so we would expect something to be happening slightly quicker. So he's just running into it like this. It's not so much that he's arriving quicker, it's that he's lifting off ever so slightly later. So we can take that foot controller, I'll come out to the 1-2 just to hold it there, come back, say that I'll hold it there, and of course 2 there, which is the actual contact point. I'll roll it back to give him the heel contact like this. Let's see how that's looking, shall we? So what I'm going to do is just set my timeline, let's say there, 68 shall we say, so as I can watch this roll a bit, pull it out so we can see the whole thing, and let's give that a little playback. There. Okay, good. What we haven't got is the lift up on that right side foot. It's just sort of dragging itself along a bit. It's also starting to lift up a bit too early, so 1, 2, 3 back. Let's of course reset the value there, grab the actual IK goal, make sure that you're up off the floor somewhere around here. You can find that and can actually just pitch you forward slightly. There we go, and then the foot rolls into its turn like that. My IK goal might now be a little bit high, so I can bring that down. Again, he doesn't need to do a hugely exaggerated lift. See how we're looking. Very good. That little step back that he does looks very natural there. Sort of rights himself, lifts his body up, brings that right foot backwards ever so slightly. Looks pretty good. There, liking the look of that. So it's looking good in side view. Let's have a look at view 4. Okay, there we are. Legs spaced quite wide apart. He looks like he's got some sort of, I don't know, hemorrhoids or something going on there. We don't like that one little bit, so let's switch to our front view. And of course realise that whilst he's standing, we have a good spacing on the feet, but once he starts walking, he's probably going to want to, bring them in some. So since we will have recorded X keyframes in our actions here, what we'll do is we'll just jump into the graph editor, and straight away we can see the X channel there. So of course what we're going to want to happen is for that only to change once he starts moving. So 31 has to hold on the X. And then this one here at 34, we're going to get rid of the X frame 4, so that can go away. And then once he gets into the step, that's these additional keys here. And which way is that going to go? This way. There we go. So bring that in nicely. And it gives him a slightly better center line of where his foot goes. Yep, good. And of course we'll come and do the same sort of adjustment here over on the right side foot that we have. Now when he makes that little bringing the foot back, I might even there cause him to bring it in ever so slightly on the X. So I'll grab all of the frames including and after that one, and it's going to push the opposite direction, isn't it? Yes. So there we go, we get that little slight thing there. That's good. When he comes to, holds it there, he lifts off to bring it across. There we are. We're going to want it to be more over to the side. So that's the up, which we again here and delete away. And then from this point onward, yes, his foot's going to come more like that. Good. So let's have a little look at that from the front then. Ah, there we go. That's starting to look a lot more natural, isn't it? So let's see it in perspective view here. He's sort of doing a bit of a plod at the minute there, but that's okay, because for the minute, as I say, we're just going to worry about working in the mechanics of these, and we'll refine that, as we work through. Now, hopefully at this point, you'll excuse and forgive a little bit of Magic Wand jumping ahead. As you can see, I've just very quickly behind the scenes here thrown in the action on those feet across the walk cycle. Of course, all I've really done is just repeat what we just saw a few moments ago and repeated it for these few steps. So there's nothing particularly of interest to see apart from me repeating the same action over and over again. What is more pertinent though, of course, is what happens here when he comes into the stop. So we can see that, of course, this left foot here comes into a forward position, whilst the right foot just does a little trail and obviously doesn't come a full step forward. We're just pulling that in by a small amount. However, of course, if we look from the front, what we're doing when we stop is we've still got the feet together, as in much closer in on the x-axis, which kind of looks wrong, especially when he goes into his grr like this. That looks a bit strange. So what we're going to want to do when he comes into that final land there is we are going to want to space these feet slightly. How might we do this? Well, we could of course have this landing foot come in a little bit further over, but we're not going to. What we're going to do is work it this way instead. We're going to have his landing foot land in on the X as we ordinarily would have. We're then going to come to his right hand foot. Sounds a bit strange, that, I think, right hand foot, but I'm sure you get what I mean. And when it is brought forward, we'll nudge it over slightly on the X like this. Then what we'll do is, as he rights himself, as that foot has come to rest, and he rights himself, so let's say 2 frames later, we'll key a hold on the left foot, and we'll do a, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 frame. He'll shove that foot over like this, bringing himself up into that stance. That starts to work a bit better. Of course, it looks weird because, of course, what the hip is doing. And this, having laid in just the basic action on the feet there, is what we're going to want to now start to look at, is the action on the hip. Obviously, we've done the upper body in isolation of the legs, and whilst we're doing the legs to just play catch-up with the upper body, what we do need to do is work on that meeting point, the actual hip root action, so as that plays nicely into everything we've got going on. So let's start that. Let's wind right back to the beginning here, and let's see what we've got. Okay, so first of all, he brings that right foot in like this. So as he does that, let's be sure and find a little in between here, let's say about there, and we'll push his hip ever so slightly over on the X, so as of course he's taking his weight onto his left leg here. And we'll probably help our situation by bringing up the graph editor at this point. So we've got the X position for the main root there, and what we want to do is, of course, as he comes up and that right foot goes down, is we will by this point begin pushing him back like this, so as he again adjusts his weight. There we go. So what happens with this whole side to side motion? Well, first of all, again, we can take out these unnecessary in between frames there, and we can have a look at how he's going to swing his weight. So here he is, his weight's mainly there. We see the X position of the main root. Once we slide out, we're going to want to shift his weight a little bit to the right side. And at this point, I'm going to change my auto key to modified only. This way I'm not going to start creating additional keys on my Z and Y channels. So we'll start pushing him a little bit this way. We can see the curve that we're creating here. There we go, that comes over till here. And then we hit the down as the foot comes down, and we'll start to swing his weight over onto his opposing foot like that. Again, there he is fully up on that side. We shall reach this point in time where his weight has come completely down on that foot, push him slightly over like that, and of course, as we see, we're just going to rinse and repeat that throughout the cycle here, nudging his weight about from one foot to the next. Once again over here. Now he's going to be coming into his stop, so as he does so, there, we push his weight this side just a little, not as heavily as before. We see that this is of course falling down. These are more or less even, these are more or less even, but this is now reduced because of course he's stopping, we're slowing his momentum. At this point we'll keep his weight ever so slightly over that way. We'll let him start to slink back a little bit, so of course that's this little dip here. And then as that foot comes forward there and takes weight, then by the point that this left foot has started to lift off again, so let's say there, we want his weight to have swung slightly over here, and let's see how that now appears. There we go. See that we have this curious little weight shift. This is an interesting little observation to make. You see that the weight shifts to the right leg, but whilst the left leg is still in motion, it hasn't planted, he's starting to swing his weight over to the left leg. This is something that you'll see when bringing a character to a stop like this. You have this little overlap. The character is shifting his body weight because he knows where his foot is going to land. He doesn't have to wait to place the foot before you move the weight of the body onto it. The idea is, it's kind of like in a walk. People say that a walk is continually catching yourself from falling. Essentially, that's what we're doing here. We're pushing the weight one way to create a little stabilization so as he can lift this left leg. But then as the leg starts to move to the side, he lets his weight start moving to the side. And of course, as the leg makes contact, we'll then just give him a, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4 frame slight overshoot there. In fact, it'd probably be a bit more, 5, 6, I think, perhaps. Little 6 frame overshoot like that. Now maybe 5 was a better choice. Let's go back to 5, and then there we go. We've rolled him back in. So let's take a look at this, see how that starts to look. There, look at that. Ah, you see that wonderful little shimmy that he does right there at the end as he corrects his footing? Very natural. Again, we could have worked all of this in at once, but because we were just worrying about the upper body, getting that characterization in, and because of course the fact that we've just keyed our root rather sparingly, we are able to make these adjustments to work the whole thing together at the end point here. So let's do the other refinement, which is going to be how he swings his hips whilst he's walking. And this rig has a handy little hip swing controller here, so we can work nicely on that. This will help just add to the feeling of weight swinging around on the hips. I don't really need the graph editor open for this. So how are we going to do this? Well, what you'll find that you do is when you place weight onto a limb, you tend to sink your pelvis down into that limb like this, of course. So we see that we might need just to adjust the point at which the slink of the weight here on the hip happens. At the minute it's happening slightly after that foot begins to move, so it should really just happen ever so slightly before. So let's move that back here to frame 7, and we'll key our hip swing at frame 7 also. We'll say 4 frames to let him just ditch his weight, and it's very subtle, very slight there. You don't want great grand moves. And he holds that till about 15, and then he'll begin to right himself just like this. So there we see again, nice subtle little shift. Ah, lovely, look at that, very nice. Okay, so then, which is the first leg taking the weight? It's going to be obviously the right leg here. So coming pretty much there from frame 28, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This leg is lifting up, that leg is pushing down, and so we tip the hip that way. What I'm just going to do quickly is delete all of the frames here that were created just during keying on that hip swing, so I'm not having to constantly back correct. Very nice. That comes down into contact right there. So we key it 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll swing it to the opposite side. There we go. Once again, hold it until the point of contact, which is here. Key it there, 1, 2, 3, 4, swing it to the opposite side. And so we'll just, of course, repeat this little motion like that. And then once we've done that for the cycle part, we're coming into the last bit here. So again, key it there at the point of contact. As it comes down, we'll go slightly slower, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because of course his whole body is slowing down, and of course he's not lifting that right foot as quickly now. So it will take a slightly slower dive, and also we're not dipping him quite as much that way either. And there we go, there's that. Pushes that leg out. We start to take weight onto it, probably about here. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've shifted his weight that way, right in the midst of that shimmy over. His leg comes into contact there. Key it again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll just sort of right his hips a little bit like that. When I say right, I mean left. You know what I mean. So let's see how that's all looking, shall we? Very nice. That little last shimmy at the end there looks a little soft. Where's it going wrong? It's really just going wrong there. It doesn't actually really need to shift afterwards, because of course there's not enough of a weight difference going on. He's not really having to swing his body quite as much. So there we go. Ah, that looks lovely. There we go. I think overall that's providing a pretty nice tip action. Let's take a look at our graph here. There we are. We're seeing this good hold and then shift and then hold and then shift. We might want to equalize some of these, but again, you know, you're adding a little bit of random action into your guy. It's probably not that big a deal. What I will look at though is the heading, which as we can see at the minute is all keyed at 0, so I'm just going to come along and delete all of those heading keys. The reason why is because I'll now switch to top view here, and we're going to do the heading swing, the pivotal swing that he will want to be enacting mainly during the walk. So what we'll see is that we're going to say, okay, we're going to hold it right there, and at this point where he's coming into contact, we'll swing the hip so as it's, you know, pitching that leg further forwards. I say pitching, obviously heading, and of course we do the counter there. Notice I'm not doing a little in-between. Generally, of course, during walks, what you'll find is that this heading swing of the root and hip is nice and periodic, whereas, of course, the bank is taking weight, and so that clips and clops with the hold. There we are, just put it in there. We're coming up to the stop point. You can let the hip begin to even out, rolling back pretty much to 0 there. And that should pretty much be it. So let's take a look in perspective view here, see how that looks. There we go. Hip swing amount is looking decent. Have a look at it from front view. Yeah, those hips are looking like they're behaving pretty well. So there we go, little front view on him there. He looks pretty clean, looking pretty nice. Check him out from the side view as well, so we can see how he's looking in this respect. I think a couple of those steps near the beginning, the foot action looks a little weak. So what's he doing there? Okay, I think what I'm going to do is have a look at how long this step is taking him from the lift off. 31 to 40, that's 9. So what I'm actually going to do here is just shift that 2 frames, and that gives it a bit more of a delay like that. And of course I'm going to work the foot placement null here. I'll need to key somewhere there, and what we'll start doing is manipulating it here, give him a bit of a lift. There we go, make that little pick over slightly more exaggerated like that. It's the effect that this has. As a result, we don't need quite to raise that up as much. Okay, this rear foot on its lift, that needs to tilt more. That's it, let's bring it right like this. And let's perhaps give it more punch to hit down. It may be just a little strong, so let's do it there. There we go, that's seeming a little cleaner now, a bit more natural. Check that those foot actions do look decent enough, and perhaps this wants to go just a little bit quicker there when he moves that foot. So what do I have it at the minute? That was like 6 frames, perhaps we'll just make it 5, so it's just slightly sharper there. And what we'll do there is, as he's moving the foot, we'll actually turn it out slightly. So we're going to use the foot control here again, and we're going to turn it off on the heel. Produce that like this on the foot controller. So he doesn't just push his foot to the side, he's actually turning his foot out somewhat as well. There we go. And we'll actually accelerate it slightly, and we'll in fact just move it back a frame earlier, so as he starts to turn just before he lifts there. So there we go, we get that action. What I also think is I might have the turn on these foot nulls, or at least this one specifically, just a bit too strong. See, that's quite sideways as it were. So I'm going to go to my graph editor, grab its heading here. Now we do want it turned in the earlier part there before he steps forward. In fact, on that first little move there, I might want to even turn it more. That gives it a little nudge like that. But then when he comes out of that, it starts to break into the walk. So from here, I'm going to want that to sort of straighten out a little, so it's not going to be at that in-between point, so I'll get rid of that. But by the time he places it here, gets ready to plonk it down, then I'm going to want to turn it back. There we go. So we're getting his foot pointed more forwards. That looks a bit more natural, I do believe. There we go. Let's of course rattle along to the point at which he finishes and comes to a stop, and see what we're going to do there. And yes, I do believe that during this action here he shall of course turn it back some like this. And also, just to add a little bit further touch, as his weight comes over to his left leg there and he makes that little shimmy, that just gives him a small opportunity right around here to turn out on the heel on that foot. Let's make sure that that does look acceptable and doesn't look weird. So we'll come back. Okay, perhaps turning on the heel was the wrong decision, so what we'll do instead is switch to the rotation. I'll have him turn on the ball a little. Actually, in fact, we might well do that whilst he is sort of in mid-air, if you will, or in mid-motion. Because of course you can do that. Yes, let's bring it all the way back here. Let's see how that looks. Does it look unusual? Not especially, perhaps a little fast. Try moving it out 2 frames, see if that makes a difference here. That looks reasonably acceptable, I think. Yes, it does indeed. Gets that nice little shift just as his weight's moving. He's sort of able to push his body off from the ball of his foot. That looks pretty nice. So at this point, just a couple of last little tidy ups. One thing that I notice is what's happening again on this right foot when he comes off into that first step there. Let's take a nice close-up look at that so as we can see it. We see, of course, because that foot is slightly spaced out on the X, then when he's doing that, that looks like a bit of a strain over the ankle. It looks kind of unnatural. What we'll do is we'll grab the actual IKG, the IK actual part for the ankle here, which is the actual object that the IK is reaching for, of course, part of this whole foot system. And what we're going to do is make sure that we've got a 0 key for that there, which is where it should be like this. Let's put one, I think there at 49 it needs it. And we're going to come back here. See that as he starts to lift off there, it should hold. And when we get up into the midpoint of the lift like that, I can grab that and I'm going to move that across there so that really leans the foot there from the toe point, which again gives this more natural sense of lift. You're not getting that weird broken ankle type thing going on. So that's pretty good. The other thing I'm going to do is look at these pole items and just get them nice and tidy to, of course, keep the knees nicely rounded for where he is and where his feet are pointing and so on. So let's see, we want to be holding fast till about here, I think, and then as he comes up like that, knee can just sort of turn out a little there, since of course the foot is somewhat out. Maybe that's a little much, bring it in some. And as we come across here, that's it, the knee comes more central, more directly forward. Hold it till about there. As we come to that point there, we just need possibly slightly out. Let's look, there's the real crux point, so get it there like that. Comes forward, there we are, bring it nice and in line with the foot. There we go there. I also see, of course, at this point where he's coming into his stop, this foot, or rather this leg, it's really starting to pull at the knee. I really want to make that a little bit softer, so whilst I'm here, I'm going to tease that out slightly. So we'll say that the foot can hold there. It will of course come to rest somewhere over there, so what I'm going to do is here, I haven't really put the lift in, so somewhere about here-ish I think. There we go, we need the lift in just so as that knee stays nice and soft. And then 1, 2, 3, after that point, make sure we've got it keyed fixed there. Can have him so he's bringing the toe up more, and of course he doesn't land on the heel here since he's not taking a step, he will land on his toe. And let's just want to reset it before that. That of course gives him a moment to take weight on the foot before he does the little ball push off there. Go back and recheck our pole after where we last had it keyed. There we go, yeah, that's all right. Very slow slink into bringing the knee round like this. Yeah, there we go, good. Bring it over here, of course, turn it back. As he's just coming waiting onto it, we'll turn it back out a little, which means I'll probably push this frame just a little earlier like this. And then of course as he's turning and pivoting on that ball, we need the knee to sort of maintain its line with the foot, something like this. There we go. Then as we get into the little ditch here, of course it's his body's turning, so his legs are spinning. So we see that the hold is somewhere around there. Let's hold it there, and as he rolls off, up until about this point, you can just turn the knee counter to that slightly, and there we go. It's pretty good. Again, I believe this leg is still snapping ever so slightly. Let me just look closely. Yeah, there it is. You see it gets that little snap bounce in it, which is wrong. So let me get that point there. I'm just going to lift it up a bit more, quite simply. Out here, dodge it forward a little bit more, like that. Gives a little more liberty to the knee there. And actually what we can see, having done that, we see we get this nice lift, and the you get this, you do start to get now this sense of the muscle in the leg and the springiness of the tendons there. As the leg lifts, the tendons sort of start to take over and spring it back into position, so that's pretty good. And what I might do even more is bring the landing position of this foot just a little bit further forward, in fact. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so there we go. Let's check the pole for this knee now. Centralize that, go back to the beginning. We see that that is more or less where we want it there at frame 1, so let's work through. Good. Coming through here, there's a little snap into that knee. We see that? Yep, let's work that out. Smooth that motion. Where is it? There it is. Sproing. Yeah, little bit of snap. Oh, it's not bad, but it could be better. So let's just start to come out to that there. Ditch you ever so slightly further, like this. There we go. That puts it into a bounce more than a snap. You see that little subtle bounce that we've got going there? It's much more natural. Good. Let's go back to the pole. Okay, it's good. Let's say about here-ish. By that point, it's a bit far out. So let's tease it back like this. Come into contact. Bring it more into line with the foot there. That's good. Okay, by about this point, it needs turning back on itself. Again, a little bit more by there. Coming back into contact, too far in. Let's take it out slightly. That's good. Coming into the stop, it needs to keep rolling. Pretty good until he starts to, of course, turn from the heel. So we come across there. See that that's pretty good. Okay, and let's just make sure it holds. Yes, again, it's that roll. So where's that up until about here? Let's run it forward. That's about the whole point there. So we bring it back, and there we go. So the leg counts that roll. Very nice. So let's again now take a last look. See if this whole thing now looks nice and clean and tidy. How does he appear? I think that's pretty good. Take a nice detailed look. Just try and watch each part of him moving sort of in isolation to, you know, gauge your eye and make sure that you're catching all of the little bits. Not seeing any really snappy knees or anything else that looks at all out of place. I do believe that I like it so far. Well, again, look at him from front view. So we get a nice clean orthogonal look at his different moves. Pretty decent. Look at him again from side view here. Yeah, the foot action is looking nice there. No snappy knees or anything like that. Good, nice tension and bounce going on. Okay, I think the last thing that I am going to do here is I'm just going to work on the up down of the hip a little bit. So let's go back into our graphs, look at the Y here. Okay, I don't have any annoying in between Y-axis keyframes there that I need to kill, so that's good. So I can just freely do some tweening. I'm still, of course, on the auto key modified here. So when he starts to move forward initially on this frame, we're going to push him up slightly on the Y because he's sort of lifting off to push himself forward. So that gives him a little more energy there. Even slightly higher. There we go. As we see, of course, it's a slight up movement there. So he's really sort of propelling himself off. Get to there. Of course, this point, I'm going to bring this up ever so slightly, set him slightly higher than he currently is. And what I'm going to do with the up points, I really want the height of his lift here, to occur slightly different position in time. So I'm going to take these three, which are of course the three main parts of the cycle, I'm just going to nudge those in time like this. So as we get that sort of a movement, and then what I'm going to do is, as he makes contact here, 1, 2, 3, I'm going to bring him down like this. So as he takes the weight as he comes down, bring that one back up ever so slightly. 1, 2, 3, let him sink down into that weight. The one before, have him ever so slightly up. 1, 2, 3 after the landing, once again, bring him down, let him take the weight. 1, 2, 3, do the same thing here, let him take the weight slightly before coming back up. And here, of course, He's going to start to come in. Good. So we can just slink him just a little lower at that point there. Forward a slight rise before it, because he is slowing down now. There we go. So we come in to about here. So I'm actually going to grab that frame and move it across. So again, we get this slightly decelerating drop of the weight, like that. And immediately from this point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're going to start pushing him back up again, like this. There we go. There. And he reaches his full extension. Let's see how that looks. Plonk, plonk. Oh yeah. You see, we get this real sort of punch now into how he lands at the very end. It's like, look, I've arrived. So let's just see how this whole thing looks from the side now. Just push my graph out of the way temporarily so we can take a little look at this. That's looking reasonable. Let me just scrub it slow now so we can see what he's doing. Takes his weight, he's up. He takes his weight, he's up. Takes his weight, he's up. Okay. Now I might be coming up a little high on some of these. Oh, look, we didn't have the foot come up as high here. So between those steps there, of course, I can lift his foot off the ground. Sorts that out a bit. Back here, this foot action is a little weak now, so of course I'm going to just tip that back an extra amount. Good. What we're looking for here, there we see there's a bit of a poppy knee has happened now, obviously, because I've adjusted the height of the hip here. So let's take a good close look at what we've got going on. Yes, there appears to be a slight shudder going on in that leg, and that's most easily corrected by taking this high point for the foot and just moving it forward by a frame. Of course, once again, need to find the Z and X key, which of course would coincide with that point because I don't want it shifted in Z, so we just delete that there. So we have really just adjusted the height. We can also look at the speed with which we are changing this here. Give that a slight lift. That makes it better. There we go. Now we're starting to get a bit of an overextension. So what we have to do is bring that rising point of the foot where he starts to lift the heel back one frame. That takes care of that. Are we getting a similar little pop there? It's hard to say. No, we're just coming over the rise a bit too quickly there. So let's come back into my graph editor. Yeah, and all we see is that we're really just popping a little too fast here. So we just want to take that, nudge the Y keyframe over there. There, I believe that looks much better. So let's take again a look at him from the front view here. See, how does he look? Some good action going on there now. He's got a greater sense of weight due to the lift and fall that we've put on that hip. So that's good. How do the legs look? Take a nice close look here. They're good, no snappiness, that's nice. So let's see it from the side view. There we go. Seems good to me. Foot action and leg movement is working well, and the bob up and down that we've got going on the hip there seems quite clean. Definitely got a good sense of weight. Those little adjustments we made at the end where he arrives there, where he bobs down, yeah, just there where he hits. That looks very nice indeed. He's clearly slowing his momentum. He's absorbing the, the shock of slowing down into his body, taking the strain on his muscles. Very good. Giving it a look over then, as it stands, I see only one last thing which concerns me now, having added that extra, bob and wave to the hip there, to the root, and that's what he does when he does his little grrr at the end there, is of course his hip, other than pitching forward, isn't really doing an awful lot at all. So let's work on that, shall we? First of all, let's look at the pitch forward that he's doing here, because I believe it might be a little slow. So I'm going to take this frame here, come back to the old animation toolbox for this, and I'm just going to copy it, and 6 frames before it rolls forward I'm going to paste it back in there. So let's see what that does for us. We get ourselves a bit more delay. That's a little bit quicker, so that's quite good there. Let's spin around, have a little look again. I'm just going to jump in to my last chunk here because it'll just make it easier to view what's going on. Yep, a little earlier than that perhaps. There we go. Okay, so we can see that now. Good. Okay, so here's of course coming into his little his roar. So let's see what he does as he does it. Right, when he raises his body up like this, I think that what we really need to be doing is of course lifting him from the root, and for that we're going to have a little slight preemptive dip as well. So of course we've got him here on 117. We can key him just to make sure that he is indeed locked. Small dip here at 122 like this. 126 we bring him right up like that. Of course then here on 132 we bring him right down, properly bend those knees like that, come out to 142. Let's just take the 132 for now and just copy paste it into frame 142. So there we have that, because he's coming down quite quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What we'll do is give him a little bit of overshoot there, say 3 frames, bring him down just a little bit more, not a lot of course, because we're only wanting a small overshoot there. What we'll also do is when he comes down, we'll also bring him back, because of course the weight of his upper body is shifting forwards, so we need the weight of the lower body, or we need the lower body itself rather, to begin shifting backwards to obviously account for that slight difference. And again, when he comes up, we can push him ever so slightly forwards as well, like that. And there we go. You see, he does a little roll as he settles into it like that. Let's see how that looks played back from the side here. It's not bad. Yep, that's good. Let's see it from perspective. There we go. There, that's a lot more dynamic now. We're really getting the sense of him pushing through on that. What I also think I'm going to do, looking at it again, is remember this little push from the ball that we did? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to put it there. I think I'm going to put it later. Specifically, I'm going to do it at this point when he goes to raise himself up. So about there. Let's see how that looks, shall we? I think that might be a slightly better touch for this, so let's roll that on there, and let's just have a look at how different that appears. There we go. Ah yes, I think that works well. Maybe make it a little faster. There we go, just a little 4-frame snap instead of a 6-frame slush. There, smashing. I like that a lot. It's given that nice little bit of plussing on top of his action. So let's go back to the beginning here and see the whole thing. So here we are, we start off and he's like up and stomp, 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 gets to where he is and he's like, right, grr, sort of like, what do you say? I'm coming over, go on, like, say that again, something of that nature. Bit aggressive, doing a bit of posturing, just as we, originally intended pretty much. And so there we are largely, for the most part, pretty finished. We've pretty much got all of the action and all of the necessary keys that we need laid in now. And what we really see is the completion of the process that we were describing at the beginning here. We've really tried to focus more on the intention and the action and the mood of the motion. And of course you see that what we've done in these later stages, when we've added in the legs and we've gone and refined the movements of the body and the hip and so forth, is that the body mechanics have been part of the tidy up. Of course, as we said at the beginning, if you start out by just animating the body mechanic, getting that nice and square, then a lot of the tweaks and adjustments that you have to do come with trying to extract more character from the motion. Working this way, we've worked on character and mood first, and as such, a lot of the tweaks and fixes that we've had to make along the way as we refine everything out has been done to fix in the proper kind of body mechanics to go along with and play out that mood properly in the character. So let's go through and round this guy off now. We might as well, since we're here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab all of our controllers here, the lot of them, and we're going to turn them now into TCB splines, because of course up until this point everything's still linear. So we'll come over, TCB spline, set curve. We can take a look at what that leaves us with immediately, and of course we see that there's a bit of slip and slide around and not everything's entirely perfect. So what we can do is again select all our controllers, and I'm just going to use the quick clean here. That will flatten out our hold keys, tidy things up for us. So any interpolation sliding will be taken care of, any hold keys will have the TCB automatically flattened for us. We can once again watch our animation to make sure that it is all behaving itself and it has gone through the switch to TCB curve nicely, which we can see it has indeed done. And of course, with the interpolations no longer being linear, it's got that little bit extra sort of a smoothness and cleanness to it. We can, of course, if we think we might need to or want to, just of course jump into our graph editor on some areas and have a little look at the curves that we've got, see if there's perhaps any sort of tidy ups that we want to make. Obviously the quick clean has done a lot for us, but it might not have done everything. So little things like this here, where I've got these small overshoots, I might just tweak these off a bit here. This is of course the X position on the hip there, whilst all of these in between ones I might just slink off in the other direction to give it a bit more pop. The Y position can use a little bit of the same here and there, just a little bit of tweaking and tidying, just a little bit of swing to edge things out a little bit. Perhaps other controllers like the hip swing controller are a good candidate for stuff such as this. Obviously the quick clean has flattened out all of those completely. Maybe we can just bring them not completely flat if we want, so they've got just a little bit of swing and overlap in them. They're not completely, rigid. And we can see the result of our tweaked curves and everything else going on in our animation. It starts to look pretty slick, pretty smooth, really quite nice. Then finally, of course, we can get our character actually, looking proper, make an actual preview, having of course hidden away all of the control nulls, as we don't need those clogging up our view, just as we can get an actual look at how he really looks. And so as we can of course get a play blast that is, fully smooth and everything else. And there we go. I think he looks pretty nice, stomping along, looking mean. And we've got ourselves a pretty nice animation that's, reasonably simple. It's mostly just a walk cycle, but it is full of character. The mood and intention of what he's all about is clearly starting to shine through. And overall, we've got ourselves a pretty good result. So there we see the alternate approach to how you can go about structuring certain moves, whether it be walk or run cycles, or of course more general animation. You can start out by focusing on the mood, character, intention, action elements of the piece and worry about the body mechanics sort of as a secondary part to the whole process. And you might find that such a way of working through your character animations can be very intuitive and help you to get more character out of your final animation.